The Auction. By Stephen Crane. Some said that Ferguson gave up sailoring because he was tired of the sea. Some said that it was because he loved a woman. In truth, it was because he was tired of the sea and because he loved a woman. He saw the woman once, and immediately she became for him the symbol of all things unconnected with the sea. He did not trouble to look again at the grey old goddess, the muttering slave of the moon. Her splendors, her treacheries, her smiles, her rages, her vanities, were no longer on his mind. He took heels after a little human being, and the woman made his thoughts spin at all times like a top, whereas the ocean had only made him think when he was on watch. He developed a grin for the power of the sea, and, in derision, he wanted to sell the red and green parrot which had sailed 4 voyages with him. The woman, however, had a sentiment concerning the bird's plumage, and she commanded Ferguson to keep it in order, as it happened, that she might forget to put food in its cage. The parrot did not attend the wedding. It stayed at home and blasphemed at a stock of furniture, bought on the installment plan, and arrayed for the reception of the bride and groom. As a sailor, Ferguson had suffered the acute hankering for port, and being now always in port, he tried to force life to become an endless picnic. He was not an example of diligent and peaceful citizenship. Ablution became difficult in the little apartment, because Ferguson kept the wash basin filled with ice and bottles of beer, and so, finally, the dealer in second-hand furniture agreed to auction the household goods on commission. Owing to an exceedingly liberal definition of a term, the parrot and cage were included. "On the level!" cried the parrot, "on the level? On the level? On the level!" On the way to the sale, Ferguson's wife spoke hopefully. "You can't tell, Jim," she said. "Perhaps some of 'em will get to biddin', and we might get almost as much as we paid for the things." The auction room was in a cellar. It was crowded with people and with house furniture, so that as the auctioneer's assistant moved from one piece to another he caused a great shuffling. There was an astounding number of old women in curious bonnets. The rickety stairway was thronged with men who wished to smoke and be free from the old women. 2 lamps made all the faces appear yellow as parchment. Incidentally, they could impart a luster of value to very poor furniture. The auctioneer was a fat, shrewd-looking individual, who seemed also to be a great bully. The assistant was the most imperturbable of beings, moving with the dignity of an image on rollers. As the Fergusons forced their way down the stairway, the assistant roared, "Number 21! Number 21!" cried the auctioneer. "Number 21! A fine new handsome bureau! $2! $2 is bid! 2.5! 2.5! 3! 3 is bid! 4! $4! A fine new handsome bureau at $4! $4! $4! FOURDOLLARS! Sold at $4! On the level!" cried the parrot, muffled somewhere among furniture and carpets. "On the level! On the level!" Everyone tittered. Mrs. Ferguson had turned pale, and gripped her husband's arm. "Jim! Did you hear? The bureau, $4! Ferguson glowered at her with the swift brutality of a man afraid of a scene. "Shut up, can't you?" Mrs. Ferguson took a seat upon the steps, and hidden there by the thick ranks of men, she began to softly sob. Through her tears appeared the yellowish mist of the lamplight, streaming about the monstrous shadows of the spectators. From time to time these latter whispered eagerly, "See, that went cheap." In fact, when anything was bought at a particularly low price, a murmur of admiration arose for the successful bidder. The bedstead was sold for $2, the mattresses and springs for $1.60. This figure seemed to go through the woman's heart. There was derision in the sound of it. She bowed her head in her hands. "Oh, God, $1.60! Oh, God, $1.60! The parrot was evidently under heaps of carpet, but the dauntless bird still raised the cry, "On the level!" Some of the men near Mrs. Ferguson moved timidly away upon hearing her low sobs. They perfectly understood that a woman in tears is formidable. The shrill voice went like a hammer, beat and beat, upon the woman's heart. An odor of varnish, of the dust of old carpets, assailed her and seemed to possess a sinister meaning. The golden haze from the 2 lamps was an atmosphere of shame, sorrow, greed. But it was when the parrot called that a terror of the place and of the eyes of the people arose in her so strongly that she could not have lifted her head any more than if her neck had been of iron. At last came the parrot's turn. The assistant fumbled until he found the ring of the cage, and the bird was drawn into view. It adjusted its feathers calmly and cast a rolling wicked eye over the crowd. "Oh, the good ship Sarah sailed the seas. And the wind it blew all day. This was the part of a ballad which Ferguson had tried to teach it. With a singular audacity and scorn, the parrot bawled these lines at the auctioneer as if it considered them to bear some particular insult. The throng in the cellar burst into laughter. The auctioneer attempted to start the bidding, and the parrot interrupted with a repetition of the lines. It swaggered to and fro on its perch, and gazed at the faces of the crowd, with so much rowdy understanding and derision that even the auctioneer could not confront it. The auction was brought to a halt, a wild hilarity developed, and every one gave jeering advice. Ferguson looked down at his wife and groaned. She had cowered against the wall, hiding her face. He touched her shoulder and she arose. They sneaked softly up the stairs with heads bowed. Out in the street, Ferguson gripped his fists and said, "Oh, but wouldn't I like to strangle it?" His wife cried in a voice of wild grief, It made us a laughing stock in front of all that crowd. For the auctioning of their household goods, the sale of their home, this financial calamity lost its power in the presence of the social shame contained in a crowd's laughter.